Hey everyone, just wanted to jump in before the episode and let you know that this is actually part of a 3-part series we're working on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Bad Architecture. Hopefully I will come up with a better name before we release the episode. I also want to take a moment to thank everyone for the likes, subscribes, shares, tweets, all the other ways you've been reaching out to us and letting us know that you've been enjoying our work. It really means a lot, and if you know someone that you think will enjoy Swaying the Small Stuff, we really hope you will go ahead and share it with them, because we found the best way to grow our audience is through personal recommendations. And I'm willing to bet as we do more of these series, they're going to thank you for it. Anyway, just wanted to say thanks again, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. On with the show. Hello all, and welcome to Sweating the Small Stuff, a show where we sweat over the details that make our world richer. I'm your personal brain trainer, Cameron Boozarjomehri, and today I'm joined by an ultra special guest. I'm so excited he's in this office right now. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Dad?
I haven't been called Dad with two cool guys, but you didn't hear that from me. I'm Abdi Boozarjomehri, and I'm Cameron's father.
So you, in addition to having the great honor of being my father, if you consider it that, you have a PhD in architecture and a master's in structural engineering?
Yes, I do. I have a PhD in architecture from University of Pennsylvania. I have master's in structural engineering from University of Pennsylvania. I have master's in architecture and bachelor's in civil engineering.
And if we keep going, I'm sure we could have listed even more credentials for the rest of the afternoon.
That's good enough for now.
But for today's episode, we need to focus on one very important aspect of life, which is you know how to build things. You know how to build structures that last, right?
I have built few.
So the topic of today's episode, which I knew as soon as I came up with it, I had to talk to you about, was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Nonsense Architecture. Because in those movies, I know you've seen all of them. We've watched them together. There is always a moment where there's just like some poor guy thousands of years ago had to just build this at least football field length hallway that's just full of booby traps and nonsense, most of which only is, I would imagine, designed to work once. And I really wanted to talk to you about how realistic, how plausible is any of that stuff when it comes to could we make it, and why would we ever want to make something like that?
To start with, the Egyptians built pyramids for no use but to put their dead. So the possibility of doing it is there, but the logic behind doing it the way they show it movie is a little bit funny. So we can go through that one where you are under the mountain and you have a cave that you get into and have all these structures built within the cave. It becomes a little bit very, very unrealistic and practical.
Yeah, because it's one thing for you to have built this magic hallway out of stone and tile and whatever. It's another thing for you to carve it into a mountain, where the mountain itself is something you really have to dig into.
I would say it would have been most probably, if they did it, there was a granite type mountain, like let's say the El Capitan in
shout out to you, Apple.
The Yosemite, and they had to cut into this granite to create the openings that they wanted to do, and then putting things together to create this environment of protection.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, let's just kind of like jump into the first one. So Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the opening sequence, that just the whole portion where Indy's going into this cave that we can assume has been some sort of earthen mound that was built out of stone and tile and brick. And he goes through a fun series of traps. So for anyone listening at home, I know this would be a lot more fun if you could watch it. And I'll include links for you to see it, but I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with kind of like the big traps that happen. So the first one is pretty easy. It's just a big pit. There's just a big pit, and he has to swing over it. Thoughts?
That would be doable without any problem. Most probably they dug that one also to get to water, so they can have water for their slaves or whatever to do what
Wow,
they were going to do.
that is a weirdly astute observation. I didn't even think about the fact that they probably already dug wells for water anyway. Why not just make them pull double duty with some spears? That's genius. All right, so the next thing is the hallway of dart guns.
That is doable if you have, but it is very difficult because if you are physically, let's look at the logistics of how you can accomplish what they intended to accomplish. The way it is every one of those pieces that they are in more like brownish color, those were intended to be loose, so they push on some sort of device below them in order to activate some arrows to shoot at the right angle to the right person who is on top of that particular stone or brick or whatever you want to call it. But the problem there is that you need to have an under the slab complete structure of thousands of either ropes or basically ropes because or some sort of sticks like bamboos or something that they can extend so many feet to the side and then climb up to the location of those statues that they have holes on them so they can be act as arrow shooters. So if this was cut in a stone to create this, that would be impossible. So the next issue is that did they build this one in order, this more like a kind of corridor, to be able to first put all of this infrastructure under it and then put the stones on top of it and put the bricks on top of it to make happen. It is extremely, extremely impractical, especially with the technology of the time.
I really do appreciate that you're talking specifically to the era, because I feel like that's something you've always been very good on, just in our many conversations over my lifetime, is knowing not just what's going on, but what's going on in the context of the time, which is exactly as you pointed out. They don't have like fancy electronics and magic buttons. They have ropes and bamboo that they have to make it work.
I would assume that even to make the movie and having those few arrows shot, they had to go to great deal of trouble of wood and wood and wood to make that happen. Even in the movie, forget about what you want to do in reality of life of, let's say, Incas. I guess this is South America, so I assume it is in one of the tribes of the time. So, and knowing their technology and capabilities, they did not even have the steel. That is where they were so surprised when the Spanish came there with their swords and their helmets. So given that fact, it is clear that they did not have the technology. The other funny thing about it is the arrows they have actually have a steel on them because they are steel arrows, and Indians did not have steel arrows.
That is an exceptional observation. And actually, so there's still one last trap we have to go through, obviously. It's you have to go to get the idol. And then when you move the idol, it triggers the crazy boulder thing that chases Indiana Jones out.
That becomes another issue of the interest. We are assuming that that idol was solid gold. We are assuming also that they did not have a technology to create a hollow gold. So if that piece was a solid gold, that is 1 cubic decimeter, which comes to 21 kilos at least, which comes to be just holding it in his hand. That gives me, the decimeter is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. So that is the volume you are looking at. So as such, that volume would have 21 kilo weight, which translates to almost 100 pounds. For Indiana Jones to pick that one up so easily, it makes no sense. But then when I saw the show, I noticed that he threw his sandbag on top of the pedestal in hopes that would replace the gold statue, which of course that was stupid.
Yeah,
But
the bag is the same size as the statue.
But then, more interestingly, that the pedestal went down instead of coming up. So if that weight was keeping the pedestal down in order to create a kind of safety device, once you take the 90 pounds, 100 pounds out of an object, which we assume there is some springs or some devices under it, that thing would go up, don't go down.
That's a really good
So,
observation.
but as a result of that, going down made no sense whatsoever, from mechanical standpoint.
And then the last part, I'd assume it would be fairly trivial. When you're running out of the cave, at that point you've triggered every trap in the cave, so it's not hard to trigger a giant boulder.
A giant boulder and the door coming down and everything else are not unusual. But if you look at the Egyptians, where Egyptians basically had these devices sometime I read or so, I don't know, maybe in childhood, that once they put the mummy in its place and they walked out and they had these devices that they let the sand come and fill up all the passageways. So as such, I can assume that it's feasible to have some sort of releasing devices that they let the doors shut down. And we already talked about the arrows, so that is beside the point. Or a boulder coming down. But having that boulder made and delivered up to that location and secured and being so perfect was a little bit, crazy.
I love that you're harping on like that. There's this realism aspect that they wanted to go for that, like, let's be honest, if you had this boulder, it would be such a pain in the butt setup that why would you even do it?
You would have problem raising it up to the location. It would be doable, but it is very, first of all, it would be very difficult because if you look at the pyramids and the way they built the pyramids, they had these rollers that they used based on what actually they tried to recreate a piece of one stone to be pulled by how many people, volunteers, not slaves. So, and those guys were well fed, very enthusiastic about doing it. And they end up to have 100 people to pull that one just for a little bit of distance. And this is at the time when the whips were the ones governed the operation. So now you have a round piece of object in a very limited opening. The opening was it was as big as the object. So as such, you can only put so many people in front of that one to push it up. And technically, that one being a stone, you would look at maximum 10 or 20 people. There is no way 20 people could roll that stone on that steep slope up the hill to the location that it needed to sit.
And this is all inside of a confined close quarter space, where the Egyptian model, it's like an open air. You have ropes able to apply power from all directions.
They had pushed it and pulled it and everything else, and they had ropes that they could go 100, 150 feet, and they would have number of ropes and bear in mind, this is a round object. It's very different than having a square object where you tie things to it and start. Of course, you can still tie ropes to this object, but trying to pull it on that slope up to a confined area, because you didn't have a football field behind that one. Most probably that was tucked into a very tiny spot. So it would be extremely impractical or not doable, for lack of better words, to push it up there and try to put it in that confined environment for only the function of coming down and killing one person.
And that's the best part of this entire thing, is that this is... And that's the best part of this entire thing, is it's a single use. This is the part that bothers me the most about the entire function of this one setup of traps, is like, these people worship this golden idol, right? So why on earth would you put it at the end of all these deadly traps to get to if it's actually supposed to be a religious idol?
That is the interesting observation. Realistically, you put mummies there and put all of the gold and everything around it. in order to protect them, then you try to. But if you have one object that is a symbol of your respect to gods or goddesses or whatever it was, and the intent of it is to be there, to be worshipped, this doesn't make any sense at all. So it could be good showing on movie of Indiana Jones, but in reality of even back in 1,000 years, it made no sense whatsoever. You can see the pyramids where they take the people's hearts out and burn them, thinking that that's going to give them rain. That's understandable. But the function of pyramids were not only for burning the hearts. It had other functions from which still is not clearly understood. That if they were any kind of like in Machu Picchu, it is clear that the angle of the sun has a lot to do with the location of one structure and how the sun comes up. So they had very good astronomical knowledge, and that is why still in debate what the pyramids were for, but definitely they did not build them to kill somebody and throw him down the step. That just came down later.
All right. Well, this has been a really fun conversation about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and for the next one, we'll have you in to talk about Temple of Doom, if that's cool with you.
That sounds good.
So that'll do it for this episode of Swing the Small Stuff. You can find us on all social media at Small Stuff Show, and you can download and subscribe to Swing the Small Stuff wherever you get podcasts. And if you made it this far and want to hear more of my dad's incredible intellect picking apart Indiana Jones traps, please do subscribe and show this to your friends and get them in on the fun. Anyway, I've been your personal brain trainer, reminding you, from movies to media to the world around us, it's details like these that make it worth sweating the small stuff.